Sinbad the Sailor. You hear that name and, your mind just floods with images of giant birds, sea monsters, and mountains of treasure, right? He's one of the biggest heroes from the legendary 1001 Nights. But his story, it's so much more than just a simple adventure tale. It's really a story about insane luck, crushing hardship, and what someone finds at the end of it all. So let's get into this epic. So our story actually starts on the hot, dusty streets of Baghdad. Picture this. A poor porter, who also happens to be named Sinbad, is so exhausted he just collapses outside this incredible palace. He can hear music, he can smell amazing food, and in this moment of just total desperation, he cries out, how is this fair? Well, someone inside hears him, and that complaint is about to get a very, very long answer. You see, the owner of that palace is Sinbad the Sailor. He invites the porter inside and tells him that his incredible wealth wasn't just handed to him. Oh no, it was earned through 7 absolutely terrifying, life-changing voyages. And the whole thing kicked off not because he was looking for adventure, but because he'd made a huge mistake.
Yeah, Sinbad wasn't always some hardworking legend. He actually inherited a massive fortune from his parents. But being young and foolish, he completely blew through all of it on parties and luxury. One day he woke up and it was all gone. So, filled with regret, he sells the last few things he owns, buys some goods to trade, and hops on a merchant ship. He wasn't setting sail for glory. He was setting sail to survive. And as Sinbad starts telling the porter about his 7 voyages, this wild and kind of brutal pattern starts to emerge. We're talking shipwrecks, monsters, cannibals. For Sinbad, total disaster was always just the beginning. It was this terrifying first act before he'd find an even bigger fortune.
It's almost like a formula, this 4-step loop that just repeats itself. First, he sets sail trying to make a profit. Second, something absolutely catastrophic happens. Third, he somehow survives, completely alone, against all odds. And fourth, he manages to escape, not just with his life, but way richer than he was before. Let me give you a few examples, because they're pretty nuts.
Okay, so on his very first voyage, the ship lands on what looks like a beautiful little island. The crew gets off, they light fires to cook a meal, and then the island starts to move. Turns out they weren't on an island at all. They were on the back of a giant sleeping whale. The heat wakes it up and it dives deep into the ocean. Sinbad is thrown into the sea, and he can only cling to a piece of driftwood as his ship and all his friends are just gone. If you thought the whale was crazy, Voyage 2 gets even weirder. He gets left behind on an island and finds this enormous white dome. He soon realizes it's an egg, the egg of the mythical roc, a bird so huge its wings block out the sun. In this moment of pure genius, or maybe desperation, he ties himself to the bird's leg with his turban. The roc flies off and drops him right into a valley littered with diamonds but also guarded by snakes big enough to swallow an elephant, of course.
And his knack for running into monsters just keeps going. On his 3rd voyage, he and his crew get captured by a one-eyed, man-eating giant. And if that sounds a little familiar, it should. It has some serious Odyssey vibes. Just like Odysseus, Sinbad comes up with this clever plan to heat a giant iron spit in the fire and blind the monster, giving them just enough time to make a frantic escape. So, escaping a whale, a giant bird, and a cyclops. You might be thinking, wow, this guy's just the luckiest person who ever lived. But it was so much more than that. The real secret to his survival wasn't just about what happened to him, but how he reacted to it.
Sinbad's greatest tool, really, was his mind. First, he was incredibly resilient. I mean, he never once just gave up, even when he had lost everything, again and again. Second, he was clever. He was always thinking, always looking for a creative way out of an impossible jam. And third, he had this really unique philosophy, this optimistic fatalism. Basically, he believed his fate was up to God, but he also knew he had to do everything in his power to survive. So, was it luck or was it resourcefulness? Let's go back to that Diamond Valley. Other merchants would throw huge chunks of meat into the valley, hoping diamonds would stick to them, so eagles would carry them back up. Now that meat falling from the sky, that's luck. But Sinbad seeing that and having the brilliant idea to tie himself to a piece of meat to get carried out by an eagle, that's pure resourcefulness. He didn't just wait to be saved, he made his own luck. After 6 rounds of this insane cycle, disaster, riches, repeat, You'd think he would have learned his lesson and just stayed home. But nope, he decides to go on one more trip, a seventh and final voyage. And it's on this last journey that he finds his most important treasure of all.
I mean, really think about it for a second. This is a guy who has literally seen it all. He's stared down monsters, he's held more diamonds than you could count, and he's cheated death more times than anyone should. What could possibly be left for him to discover? What treasure could top everything he's already found?
The answer was peace. After that seventh voyage, Sinbad came back to Baghdad and he never left again. He finally realized that no amount of gold, no pile of diamonds, no thrilling adventure was worth more than the safety, the comfort, and the quiet tranquility of being home. That was the ultimate prize. And so, Sinbad the sailor finishes his story, and the poor porter finally understands. Sinbad's journey was over, but the journey of his story, well, that was just getting started, transforming from a sailor's tall tale into a global icon.
You know, these stories didn't just appear out of thin air. They most likely started as actual sailors' yarns, swapped in busy ports along the Indian Ocean during the Islamic Golden Age. Just imagine merchants in Baghdad, which was like the center of the world back then, sharing these wild, exaggerated stories of risk and reward. They were told and retold for centuries before they were ever written down, and eventually they made their way into European translations of the Arabian Nights, which made them famous all over the world. So why do these stories still feel so powerful today? Well, it's because they follow a timeless pattern called the hero's journey. It's a simple formula you see everywhere. Someone leaves their normal world, they face incredible challenges, and they come home completely changed by the experience. It's the blueprint for everything from ancient myths to the biggest Hollywood blockbusters, because at its heart, it's a story about personal growth. In the end, Sinbad's story is really a giant metaphor for life itself, isn't it? We all set out on our own voyages. We all face unexpected storms and have to survive our own kinds of monsters. We lose things, we find things, and with any luck, we come back a little bit wiser. It kind of makes you stop and think, what's the most important lesson you've learned from your own journey so far?